My
goodness.
God, I don't know. Look, I do the very best I can. All right, it's time. It is Monday. It is just after the bottom of the hour or on its way to the top of the next hour. We are here with a major case, and I will try to get it to run for you. It's
Welcome to Mark's Murder Mystery Monday.
Wow. And the host and correspondent for all things murder mystery. Well, I don't need to tell you, but I am going to tell you anyway. It's Courtney, everybody. Yeah.
Yay!
Hi.
Courtney,
Hi,
say hi to Albert.
Hi,
How are
Albert.
you?
Yeah,
Happy
yeah.
New Year.
Albert, thank you.
Yeah. The deal is that there is a major case in Idaho. Am I right, Courtney?
Yes. Yes.
And what I'd like to do is I'd like to run a little bit from ABC. They did a piece that I think sets the table, and then you can bring in some discussion around the table setting. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All
That's
right.
great.
So you'll have to tell me if you're able to see this, Kim. Can you see? Because without
Yeah.
Tony, okay, without Tony, I'm having some issues here. So, all right, here.
Now I can't hear it, but I can see it.
Oh, you can't hear it? Is that what you just said?
Yeah.
You can't hear it. Okay. So you see, when Tony was not here today, I had sent everything to Tony thinking he was going to be on today. And then when he's not on, and by the way, I'm speaking right now, not just randomly complaining. I want you to know I am I'm stalling while I try to fix this. But I don't really have the tools necessary to fix it, Courtney, because I'm a man of limited abilities when it comes to this.
Was there a mention otherwise?
You can see this, but you can't hear it. I don't know, man.
Mark, can you send me the link? I'll share it on my screen.
All right, I'm going to send Albert the link.
I mean, this might not be a good time to bring it up, but somebody did send in drops for me, Mark, and
oh yeah. Well, we don't those.
So
I was going to.
And I appreciate that.
This is. I don't know what to do. I need to stop sharing. Right. My God.
Do you want? Yeah.
This is. Yeah. You'll fill in some of the details here in a moment, but so we stop sharing. You can't see the screen anymore. Am I right?
That's right.
You're good.
Okay. I don't know.
It's all right. We'll get it.
Okay, we will get it. Albert, I'll send this to you. Maybe you can. I should have CC'd Albert on all of this. I don't know why I didn't. I just assumed Tony would be here, and I'm disgusted. Yeah, I'm disgusted by this, and of course he was sick too. You know, he was sick on Friday.
Thanks, Tony.
He did get his pizza maker over the weekend, so he might be just busy rolling dough right now.
Oh, you're right. He could be rolling dough, man. This is all just right. Everybody saying hello to Courtney.
Hi.
Yeah, Courtney.
Yeah, this is
Albert, tell me you got this that I just sent to you. New details about the Idaho college murder suspect.
I got it.
Okay, thank you. If you could share that, I appreciate it. That's a good setup piece, and then I think we can.
Yeah.
You know, the funny thing is we put a lot of work into this, and yet we put a lot of work into this, and yet I sent it all to Tony, and so it's like it's just dying there in Tony's email.
Well, the good news is this is riveting. So.
Yeah.
Really holding on to the audience's attention.
Albert, thank you.
Albert, thank you.
All right. Anyway, this is a pretty big deal when. Oh, here we go. Albert's got it for you. Let's.
Four University of Idaho students, as they were sleeping, is due in court on Tuesday. Brian Koberger now faces 4 counts of first-degree murder. He was arrested on Friday in Pennsylvania, thousands of miles away from the crime scene. His attorney says he'll waive his extradition hearing because he's, quote, eager to be exonerated. A childhood friend reveals new details tonight about the 28-year-old graduate student. Here's ABC's Kana Whitworth.
Tonight, Brian Koberger's childhood friend Thomas speaking to ABC News, describing the Idaho murder suspect as mean in high school, saying Brian was eager to be seen as dominant.
He would just put me in, he would grapple me and put me in headlocks and arm bars and stuff like that.
Koberger's family releasing a statement which reads in part, "First and foremost, we care deeply for the 4 families who have lost their precious children. There are no words that can adequately express the sadness we feel. We have fully cooperated with law enforcement agencies in an attempt to seek the truth and promote his presumption of innocence." The small community in Moscow terrified for weeks after roommates Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and her boyfriend Ethan Chapin were found stabbed to death in their off-campus home in mid-November. Koberger's lawyer saying Brian's father flew from his home in the Poconos to Washington State for a pre-planned cross-country road trip back home to Pennsylvania for Christmas in that white Hyundai Elantra.
Driving cross country took them approximately 2.5 days. Mr. Koberger indicated that Brian was acting normal and not out of character on the drive back.
Wow, imagine that.
The car seized from the Koberger's home after Brian was arrested.
Yeah, go ahead.
Friday morning. The Monroe County Chief Public Defender saying Koberger is eager to return to Idaho and be exonerated. Police in Moscow say they're confident they arrested the only person responsible for the murders. Still, they're searching for a murder weapon they describe as a fixed blade knife. The police chief saying the community has a name and a face, and now they're hoping more people will come forward with information.
We have a lot of work to do still. We still have a lot of pieces we have to put together. That's why we're still asking people, if you have known this individual, contact us.
And Lindsay, Chief Fry telling me.
I mentioned that that guy's audio didn't sound so great either. Okay. I mean, in the middle of this murder story, sorry to bring that up, but I'm kind of audio obsessed. Sounded sort of hollow. All right. Anyway, back to the murder yarn here. Go ahead to Kanya Whitworth, if you would, please.
That within an hour of releasing Koberger's name, they had more than 400 tips pour in. Also, Koberger's lawyer confirming to us that he remained there in Pullman working towards his PhD until mid-December. Now, of course, he's set to appear before a judge on Tuesday and is hoping to be quickly sent to Idaho to face charges. Lindsay.
Thank you very much. That was really good.
Hi, everyone.
Say that this is interesting. Yeah, what Sticky Cola Bud says, that killer looks so clean cut. I imagined a rough looking Hell's Angels type guy. It is a sign of what Jules is saying, what a psychopath, that you could kill those people, presuming, and it seems as though there's a lot of evidence, and you'll get to, Courtney will share some, but you could do that, and then you could take this long drive with your dad and you could just seem completely normal. It's insane. So what did lead investigators to this guy?
Well, so according to Idaho law, they're not going to release the arrest affidavit until they've served him. And so his extradition trial would have started today, but since he's waived that, it should come out in the next 2 weeks. Having said that, there were a couple key factors that have reached the press that seemingly led them to Brian Koberger. The first was obviously the car. So they had 22,000 Hyundai Elantras that were white, and they narrowed it down to him for a variety of reasons. It's also said that there was DNA found at the scene, that the scene had quite a lot of DNA there. And so apparently they took DNA from the scene and ran it through a public database.
What can you tell us about the scene?
Exactly. And then used genetic genealogy techniques to connect Koberger with his family members, because he actually wasn't in CODIS. He's never been arrested before, if you could imagine that.
What is CODIS?
It's a national database of criminals and DNA.
I knew that.
Well done, Courtney. Nice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well done. That was really well done.
Do you have the pictures or no?
The pictures.
It's okay if you don't, but there we go.
Okay.
So these are the 4 victims.
And I also want to know what
other
happened to the pictures I was supposed to see this week.
They're there. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
So these are the 4 victims and their 2 additional roommates. There's actually chilling audio, which I'll get to, but it's alleged that it's Brian Koberger talking about the murders and talking about why he didn't murder the last 2 victims. If you go to the next photo, this is the house that the young women lived in and that Ethan was sleeping in. If you go to the next one, this is an aerial shot of the house. You can see that he entered in on the 2nd floor there. And then
because you can walk up to that deck from the outside.
Yeah, if you look at that archway. He walked in through there and
Okay.
then went up to the 3rd floor where there's that deck. And then the next photo is of Brian, which we've seen. This is actually Brian's apartment in Pullman, Washington.
The
For
next
anybody
photo
that's
down,
not,
yeah.
yeah. So Brian was a PhD student at Washington State University. This is where he lived. But of course, his father flew to Washington to drive him back to Pennsylvania just before the holidays. It's also said that while they were driving and stopping for gas and food, that Brian would wear gloves so he wouldn't like leave
Oh, that
DNA
is
in different
interesting.
places, because the FBI had been tracking him at a minimum for 4 to 5 days while he drove cross country. But I
Wow.
believe that they knew that he was the suspect for a little bit of time before that.
Wow.
In the press conference on Friday, Chief Fry said, "We've been on," I'm gonna paraphrase this, but something to the effect of like, "We've been on pins and needles for the last 2 days." So I think the arrest warrant proceedings or what like happened 2 days before the actual arrest happened.
The fact that they track this guy, that they followed this guy across the
Yeah.
country, they knew that he was the guy. Go ahead. What
Yeah.
else did you need?
If you go to the next pictures, but yeah, they knew that he was the guy and that he acted alone. So he drove cross country. You go down, so this is his parents' home. So he's arrested. The SWAT team comes in at 3 a.m. and arrests him. The next photo is the arrest docket out of Pennsylvania. So we have not seen what is filed in Idaho. We will see that in the coming weeks.
Okay.
So it is said. So if you go to this slide, it is said that he was stalking the young women before the murder. Now, a lot of this social media is alleged, but I did my best to find things that have been corroborated. So this is his social media account, and he was following Maddie and he was following Kaylee.
Ooh.
And he was following them from what I know to be 2 accounts. Now, of course, unfortunately, people take advantage of situations like this for whatever horrible reason that they want to be in the media. So there are a bunch of fake accounts for him, but he was in fact following them. And it is said that cell phone pings happened in and around the movements of the people who lived in the house.
Wow.
So he
Wow.
was.
So he was stalking them on some level.
Yes, it's said that he was stalking them. Now, this is some social media posts, and there's a lot of social media out there. There's people coming out of the woodwork that are talking about Brian, that are talking about he was a heroin user in high school, and then I think he got past that, maybe went to rehab and had been doing various jobs until he went back to school for criminology and criminal justice. But these are 3 fairly assumed pieces of content that were posted on social media, one after the other, which is why I'm bringing them up. And it's said to be Brian. So on the left-hand side, there's a post from 4chan, which most people know is sort of this underground meme community that I
Is
believe
that like the incel thing where okay.
Yes, exactly. I've covered out most of this post because it is fairly awful and graphic.
Can you just speak to that though? What are you guys talking about, the incel thing? That's where, as it relates to him specifically, I mean.
Sure. It's like a community of men that are obsessed with women, but that, not dating women.
Okay.
So
they can't get it. They can't get a date for some reason. They can't. Women are not. They're repelled by these men, and so the men become then angry at women for their own failure to attract someone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Thank you.
Yes.
So he was part of that community as well, you're saying.
It's said that he was, yes.
Okay.
And so this is a post from 4chan. I've covered out a lot of it because it was fairly explicit, but it happened on December 12th. So somebody on December 12th was gloating about the murders and then said they were in the mountains of Pennsylvania, which is very specific. Then the piece of content in the middle, that's from TikTok. It was posted by an anonymous account. The only other postings on that account are like Lizzo and Harry Styles. It's very strange. And it only started toward the end of October. but that is said to be Brian. And I would never play the audio because it's very explicit, but he goes into detail about the murder. And he
So this
claims,
guy, yeah, go ahead.
Mhm.
He actually takes you through the murder, and then he says, well, this is what other people have reported, even though he's
God,
taking you through beat by beat.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So
like
he
he
claimed,
wanted to be caught or something.
I know. It's so weird. And like, I did my best to find a shot that had as much of his face in it as you could see. But he says that in the video, he is a family member of someone investigating the crime. And then he kind of goes in between the man and then a man. And he's sort of all over the place in the way that he talks about the perpetrator, but he never says murder. He never says defendant. He never says anything like that. He keeps talking about what a man would do. It's just very creepy. So this happens on December 13th, the day after the 4chan post. And then on the 14th, in the right-hand side is a screen grab from a podcast that Brian called into. If you compare the voices from the middle and the far right, it is the same voice. And so a caller calls into a true crime podcast called T-Rev, I think is the host's name, and starts to say that he used to work with Sigma Chi frat guys, and they would always ask him how to get away with murder. And he contradicts himself a bunch in the like 10 minutes that he's on air. And you can progressively see the comments get more questioning who the caller is and how creepy the caller is. And the caller's basically trying to put the blame onto Sigma Chi as a community and as a fraternity, that they somehow would have interest in killing somebody. And so that happened on the 14th. So within 3 days, you have very public postings about the crime through different social channels.
This is interesting. Are you done with the pictures? Just to ask.
Yes.
This is interesting because it's kind of what Kim was noting. You end up with a murderer who is sort of taking a victory lap kind of on his murders. So he does it with his own personal posts. He does it on 4chan. Then he does it on these podcasts that you talk about, in which imagine being a caller and sort of establishing your cred about your own murder, but then and doing a crappy job of covering up your identity, which is essentially what you're saying he did.
Yes. I mean, it's terrifying. And I don't want to play it. I don't want to give him what he was seeking in any of that. And it's also
Courtney
really
had all this
explicit.
information. The whole weekend was like, I've got this, I've got that, but I think it's too intense for the audience.
It's
and
really
too intense
scary.
just in general. Yeah.
And I think that like looking at him and his photograph, as I think one of the listeners said, it was a gruesome murder and it was done with a knife. And if you were just looking at Brian, you might consider him a PhD student, not somebody that was a serial killer that just took the lives of 4 innocent young students. And so, and I think there was an air of arrogance with him. I mean, he clearly thought, I assume he clearly thought that the police did not have a lead on him, when at that time they probably did. But to the credit of the Moscow police, I think they took a lot of flack because they didn't give a lot of information out.
Right.
And so it was kind of considered like, oh, these kind of, sorry to use this word, but like hillbilly cops, and they don't know what they're doing, when they knew the entire time. But they knew if any information got out, they were working with somebody who had a master's in criminology and criminal justice and was working on his PhD. And they ran the risk of having him as a potential flight.
Sure. No, I mean, the cops, on the one hand, they don't want to seem incompetent, but the other hand is dictating we have to keep things close to the vest, which sort of suggests we're incompetent. In other words, because we don't have any breaks in the case, when the reality is they had major breaks in the case. They really had identified this guy. They even followed him to his parents' house. I thought it was interesting in the parents' statement. I guess, we're looking forward to helping with the presumption of innocence is what I'm thinking, I guess that's what a parent has to say. But dude, if your kid's DNA was at the scene, yes. I mean, and his sister is a therapist that works with people with trauma. And his mom had recently written into a local newspaper in and around Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, where she had talked about a school shooter incident.
So anyway, I just can't imagine finding out that your son has been accused
No,
of these crimes.
and Courtney, any last second, any questions at all, Kim or Albert, for Courtney from the audience at all? Serial killers look outwardly typical with warped minds, says TG. Is that true? You're a serial killer, something of an authority.
I think there's something in the eyes. It's interesting that someone just mentioned that, because I was just looking at this article where they talked about this type of eye and there being like too much in the white of the eye. I can't remember the name of what they were talking about, but I do think you hear patterns of
dead eye.
Yeah, it's like a dead eye. There's too much white in the eye, that they're loners. That was the same thing about Brian. People were like, oh, he's a loner. I just saw him going to the trash and back. The people that lived in his apartment complex.
Yeah.
He made women uncomfortable. You see patterns of this. And so, yeah, I think there are.
This is interesting. Neiman says bragging shows it wasn't his first time, whether it's an animal or human. He's done this before. I wonder about that. He seems, as you say, to have been stalking these particular people. Maybe it was his first time. I don't know. I mean,
well, he did the survey in May, and so he asked criminals of very serious crimes their psychological and their state of mind and their mindset in and around the crimes they committed. And so one might think that he was interested in understanding that, and maybe that was leading up toward what happened. And then I don't know where he came into contact with the young women of that house. In the call, he talks about, I think it's in the call or in the TikTok video, he talks about the house being a party house. So he either like was there and seeing it or something, but like he clearly started to have resentment toward these young women. But I don't know. I mean, he could have. He could have. I think he only was in criminology in the last couple of years. I mean, he was a student. He was a school security guard at a high school in within the last decade. And so I think his pursuits of higher education in this field are fairly recent.
Yeah.
Maybe he was just trying to understand himself.
Yeah. It's really
screwed up guy.
It's
man.
really awful. I've
those sweet lives.
I've had a hard time sleeping. Not to bring it to myself, but just like the horribleness of this, the gruesomeness of this, and to think that he was out there stalking them and planning this. It's beyond anything I could remember in recent times or any, it's just awful.
Well, it's why I don't watch this stuff. I also just don't have an interest in it per se, but I also find it so immensely disturbing. I hate those movies, and even that Law and Order, is it SVU? Or the sexual crimes, dude.
I had to stop that. It got too disturbing to me.
Please, I don't even understand. How can that make it? I mean, I hate to be that guy, but like, how is that on primetime television? I don't understand. Anyway, Courtney, thank you very much
for having me.
For wrapping it up.
I know the first murder Monday of the new year. Murder Mystery Monday.
Yeah, exactly.
Murder Mystery Monday. That's right. On the Mark Thompson Show.
Yes. How about it for Courtney, everybody?
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
All right. Very well done.
Well, I'll keep everyone updated as more information comes out.
Of course. Thank you. We would
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.